morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Stedman podcast. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. For those of you who have been longtime listeners of the show, you may remember back in 2021, in the fall of 2021, we did a series called the Deconstruction Series, where we've interviewed 13 individuals who talked about their deconstruction journey, kind of how they started in their faith, kind of where they started to really question or deconstruct their faith, and kind of where they're at now. So today, I am here with three individuals from the show. This is day 2 of recording, and I will just be editing all this in, hopefully, or it'll just be a two-parter. I'm not sure how this will go, but joining me on this day of recording is John-Mark.
Hello.
I have Lindsey Gray.
Good morning.
And Mandi Hamilton.
Hi.
Guys, thank you so much for joining me. And I just have to say, right before I start asking you drilling you with all these questions, I just have to say how honored I was for you guys to come and share your journey and share your story back in the fall. I felt like anytime when I've done podcasting or I've interviewed people, it's been pretty cut and dry. And I just felt like I knew a little bit more about each and every one of you sharing your stories. So it was very powerful for me just to interview you. So kind of my first question, and again, you guys may, depending on how you react, but were you able to get an opportunity to be able to listen to some of the episodes, listen to other people's stories, and kind of what were your thoughts on the podcast in general? Lindsay, I'll go ahead and start with you.
I did get a chance to listen, and I found myself reflecting through other people's stories. So, something would trigger a thought on an experience that I had that was similar, that I hadn't even remembered or thought about until I heard someone else say, "Oh my gosh, I felt the same thing," or, just a different type of experience. So it really kind of sent me back to middle school. I went to, I don't know what kind of church this was now that I'm thinking about it, but I remember this play. For some reason, this popped into my head. This play that I went to, it was called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames. And I remember feeling when I was there so obsessed with this thing, like, I'm going to hell if I do anything bad. If I do anything at all, like, I had to be so perfect. Otherwise, I was going to be dragged off with this devil character on the stage. If anyone has ever seen this play, it's traumatic. Mm-hmm. So, and I got my parents to go to it, and they're like, "Lindsay, it's okay. Life is going to be okay." I was just so obsessed with it at the time. And I don't know if it's just because I was young and I don't know, it's so impressionable, right? And but anyway, some of the other stories kind of sent me back into that more just a different type of culture than just a standard non-denominational church that's not really pushing like heaven or hell all day long. Yeah. And so anyway, that was one thing that came up for me afterwards, just kind of reflecting on that and thinking like how that was really an interesting time in my life that I'm glad that I've moved on from.
Yeah, good. John-Mark, what about you?
I've been a bad friend. I didn't watch any of it. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I hope you still have me back.
That's okay, John-Mark. It's fine. You're not the only one who's forgotten to listen to the episode. Okay. And what about you, Mandi?
I started to listen to a few of them, but I think for me this whole process has been pretty kind of intense, and I not avoided it, but kind of avoided it. So I didn't fully listen to any of them, but I don't know, just like talking about it with you or my phone's listening to me, but I've suddenly come upon like deconstruction TikTok, and I've found myself facing a lot of people who are also like me. So that's been nice. So I may go back and give them a listen, but I think recording it for me was really, I really wanted to do it, but I was really nervous about it. And so I think after I did it, I was like, okay, I did it and I'm done. So I think it's just still been a process for me. So I haven't listened to any of the other people in full yet, but it's been really good.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, Mandi, about the whole, for some people it's very intense. And actually it was probably last month I was up in, or actually, yeah, today's March. I'm trying to, I don't remember what month it is. I do apologize. But in February I had to go up to Ohio for my doctorate learning, and I was able to reconnect with the guy I haven't talked to in like 15 years. And he was a pastor's kid, and he was asking me, he said, "Oh, have you seen the Righteous Gemstones on HBO Max?" And I said, "I've heard of it. I haven't really like gotten into it yet." And he said, even though it's a comedy thing, it's supposed to be spoofing mega churches and televangelists and everything else. He says there's some moments in there that gives me like trauma in some ways, where he's just like, oh, like it just connects, it hits something with him. Even though it's supposed to be a big comedy and spoof, but you're just like, but there's certain points where it's like, ooh, this is hitting a little too close to home. This is real. And I think for a lot of people, I think when people shared their stories, like even like, for you, it's like, I don't know, like it was just hard enough for me just to even tell my story. Where Lindsay, it's like I'm hearing people's stories. I go, oh, this is recalling other moments in my life that like, oh, I totally forgot about this, but yeah, I had a similar experience. So I think that's kind of cool. And then you, Mandi, you mentioned the whole TikTok universe, because I think since this podcast has aired, and even kind of during it, I found myself finding that kind of that subculture within social media, and social media, just like of people doing deconstruction and talking, sharing their stories. And some of them are hilarious and some of them are tragic. And even now, like I've seen just recently, Discovery Plus has put out the Hillsong Exposed documentary, which is looking at some of that stuff. And I just got a 3-month free trial from some random place. I'm like, ooh, I might activate it to watch this thing. But it's stuff like that where you're seeing such a big movement to this. And while this has kind of become a more organic and more people are coming out and sharing their stories, we've seen, at least for me, I've seen on one hand, I've seen people embrace it and say it's a time of growth, really try to deconstruct all the things you've been told and kind of go, okay, what is it that I truly believe about the world, or what do I truly believe about the Bible and about Christianity? What is some stuff that's really strong and cemented? Go, my faith is going to be based on these things, and all this other stuff I was taught is just going to kind of go by the wayside, because it's not, when I read the scriptures, it's not biblical, it's not scriptural. And then I've seen other people say that, like most famously John Cooper from Skillet, basically saying that it is a demonic spirit and that we need to kill it, this deconstruction movement, which I'm like, I think you've kind of missed the point of what it is. So there's almost a lot. And even just talking with other people, a lot of people, it's kind of mixed, and some people still don't really understand, like, well, what is this thing? Like, is it good? Is it bad? And I think that's kind of been interesting. So, from what have you guys been witnessing as far as since the podcast has been aired, like, where is this, like, where are you still seeing these conversations happening? Are you seeing them? Are you kind of, well, I did it, but I'm not hearing anything more about this whole movement. So, Mandi, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah. I that frustrates me so much what you said about, I didn't know that guy from Skillet said that. And people who have that mentality, I feel like I've seen more of it, maybe just because I'm aware of it. But people who have the mentality of like killing off or turning away from or casting away things like deconstruction, like asking questions, like changing your mind, saying that that's like not of God, or that's not good, or it's just like morally wrong, like you've been raised to believe exactly what you should believe, like don't question it, don't doubt it. It just frustrates me so much, because we are people who have brains to think for ourselves, like whether you believe God created you or not, like we have brains that work for themselves. And if you have questions as a person, you should be allowed to be free to ask those questions. And if you believe in God, I don't think that the God that I think may be out there is one who is going to be upset with people's questions. I don't think, I mean, I could be wrong, but I also feel like asking questions as a person and not being certain 100% of whatever you may believe all the time is okay. And I think that's where I feel like a lot of people that I know and have seen as I've like kind of ventured into this whole deconstruction world is that I think the biggest hurdle is getting over that fear of like, I'm allowed to ask questions. Like they feel like so afraid to not, like, they're like, I don't think I can ask questions. I can't do that. I don't want to doubt. I don't want to be a sinner. I don't want to be a doubter. And I think that is like the most damaging thing, because it like instills this fear in you that I don't think should be there. And that's the thing, as I've wandered into TikTok and as I've talked to other people, like there was this girl I met up with, we went to high school together and we were both like very Christian. Like we did the day at school where you put the tape over your mouth and like the pro-life thing. And like, we were those girls. And she told me these stories about how she, in the name of love, would talk to kids at school who were struggling, and she would just like dismiss everything and say, oh, just like follow Jesus, just like love Jesus and your life will be perfect. And she's like, I feel so bad for doing that. Like, that's not what I really wanted to say, but that's what we were like raised to say. And so talking with people like her and just venturing out into the world, I could talk about it forever, because I get so frustrated with that. And like, as children, I feel like we're told to just believe and to just trust and to just walk blindly. And I think that, yes, there can be an aspect of that in faith, but also we are humans with very complex brains and lives and situations. And if the church is going to do anything next, if they want to continue, if they want to grow and be healthy, I think there genuinely needs to be a safe place to ask the questions and to genuinely be uncertain. Yeah.
And I will speak into that, because I mean, I think the idea of don't question anything, straight up believe, I feel like almost that's contradictory to what I read in the Bible. Because I mean, I mean, you could look at the book of Job and how he'd ask questions about why, and even his friends basically making statements and asking questions. Well, you must have did something wrong. And it's like, Job's like, no. And even if you think about Jesus, and if you look at the Gospels, there's times where people would ask Jesus questions, and a lot of times Jesus would answer them, but most of the time Jesus would, again, they'd ask him a question and then he asked them a question. And it was almost like, they had to use this to really think about things, or he'd tell a story and he goes, okay, like, I mean, you look at the Good Samaritan, the whole story is, what must I do to inherit the kingdom? And Jesus says, well, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, love your neighbor. Well, then who's my neighbor? Jesus tells the story and he goes, okay, which one showed mercy, or who, basically who did the will of God? And it goes, well, the one who showed mercy. Okay, then go and do likewise. Like, Jesus was activating this, like, hey, use this noggin. So John-Mark, your thoughts, what have you been hearing, or if anything, on this deconstruction movement since we've finished recording the series, and especially the interview we had with you?
I don't feel like I've heard too much about it. I mean, I feel like I have a unique perspective since this began for me in like 96.
Yeah.
That was when I really started getting into the scriptures and realizing how much doesn't line up with what I'm hearing on Sunday morning. And I feel like I do it with my family, like every day. Like when we're doing family devotions and things, so many times, we come across things that I'm like, well, here's how Christianity views this, but this is actually what the scripture's saying. And so it's really with my family that we go over these things, and just focusing on the word and just keeping it simple. I feel like that's what Jesus was doing. He was cutting through, so much of the tradition and, the Pharisaical class, and just, he brought it down to what fishermen and farmers could understand, you know, he didn't have to go to seminary for any of that stuff.
Hey, I'm getting my doctorate, John-Mark. Shame, shame. No, I'm joking.
Church is dying by degrees. I'm just kidding you. I'm just kidding you.
You kid. That's hilarious. Lindsay, what about you?
So I think that I have I mean, my views are different because I'm very welcoming into a lot of different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, you know, it's just my choice to say, you know, I'm not going to go to a physical church. I mean, I'll go to a church, but, you know, there's still this shame and guilt that's wrapped around church to me. And I just I don't know. I don't.
That makes sense.
Can't get it into it, you know. And so, you know, just for instance, and I'll share this little thing because I think I guess since the podcast, I'm just aware of it. So if I see something that I'm like, oh, it just reminds me, you know, of the discussion. So I was downtown Phoenix at First Fridays, we have an art walk. And so there's always people out there, you know, pushing whatever agenda that they want to on any corner of the street that, you know, is doing their thing. So there's this guy with this big sign and it's, you know, it's Jesus saves and all this. And he's just screaming at people with this microphone, telling them, you know, if you don't come to the Lord right now, you are going to go to hell. And I'm like, man, that's so like to me personally, I feel like why are you just shaming this stranger that you don't even know? Like you don't even know this person walking and you're just shouting at them to like come to Jesus. And it's like, oh my gosh, I wonder what this is actually accomplishing. And you know, and I guess just my personality is just a little bit more gentle. If you really want to share God and share the Spirit, just, you know, just show a little bit more kindness and compassion and ask this person what's going on in their life if you really want to know and not just shame them. I mean, this person might go to church every day or have their own personal relationship with God that has nothing to do with you. You know, it's just like, why would you think that you have all the answers? So anyway, that's just my thing. It's just like, why is this person just shouting at these strangers and just assuming that everyone at this art festival is going to hell?
Yeah.
It's just crazy thoughts to me. So anyway.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because, you know, like I feel like a lot of that's just so generational and even denominational. You know, I mean, I grew up in a church where hell was talked about, but it wasn't to the point where I felt like if I don't make a decision to follow Christ, then I'm going to burn right this second. Like, you know, the devil's going to shoot up out of a portal, grab me and pull me down into this portal. And then it's like, oh no. But even when and again, you know, a lot of times when I hear stuff, you know, I look at Jesus's model and what he taught. And I feel like a lot of times when judgment or even when Jesus would talk about hell, I feel like a lot of times, and I mean, I could be wrong, and I'm sure John-Mark will definitely say, well, your degree's not helping you, Scott, but
I didn't.
But I know, but it just seems like a lot of time when Jesus was preaching the kingdom of God, he never really got into the whole judgment hell thing. The times he did was when he was talking with either his closest disciples, or he was really talking, a lot of times he's talking with the Pharisees and the religious leaders who's kind of, you know, or kind of perpetuating that fear tactic to you're a sinner. And not even that, because they weren't even saying, oh, get right with God. They're just saying, oh, you're doing this horrible stuff, so we're going to, based on our law, that means that we're going to throw stones at you, we're going to excommunicate you, we're going to exile you because you're doing these things. And Jesus is like, yeah, well, you know, let's talk about, you know, in the kingdom, you know, I tell you the truth, the the sinners and the prostitutes and all these people are going to enter into the kingdom of God before the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And it's like very like, ooh, like ouch, like Jesus is slapping some people around over there in Judea. So yeah, I find that fascinating. So my next question is, what have you guys experienced? And you could just do it by a nod of head or anything like that. But have you guys experienced any type of blowback from the deconstruction from your stories, or do you feel like people were asking you questions, and what questions were you kind of getting from since then? Do you feel like you got any of that? You felt like, I recorded my episode and I didn't hear a single thing about it or anything about this series. Anybody? Yes, no? I see a big smile on Mandi's face, so maybe she did.
No, I'm just thinking, I only got feedback from one person. And it was someone who also did the podcast, and they were just talking about how they were like encouraged, and that was really awesome for me to hear because I was super nervous. I'm smiling because I feel like, and this could just be my own like insecurity, but I feel like there are people who are like, oh, poor Mandi, like, oh, she's, like that kind of like anything, like she's lost her way. Because I used to, like, I came straight out of working in a church, and I'm not there anymore. So that didn't end up well. So I feel like there's people who are feeling bad for me, and that's fine. But yeah, nobody has directly said anything to me about this. I have gotten some pushback from other people on things that I've started posting online. That I used to go to church with, just my own opinions and my own beliefs. People that are close to me, not close to me. And so that's been interesting. That wasn't like directly about the podcast though, but that has been interesting to navigate, but also very freeing because I'm, being honest and being myself and posting what I believe. And that's been nice.
All right. Anybody else have any pushback or any questions since your episode or anything like that?
I think that being on the podcast is an opportunity for me to be okay with my truth. And I think that everybody has their own truth. And so what works for someone is going to be, that's, their thought process, and that's what works for them. And so for me to say, okay, well, this works for me. And that's my truth. And, and it doesn't have to work for someone else. And that's okay. And that's what's, I guess, kind of started me on this whole leave my corporate world, start my own journey.
Yeah.
And, as much as you believe in any of the, signs say, I'm an Aquarius, so I'm this person that's going to be the rebel anyway. So I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Gonna walk away and follow my own path. So, I think just the speaking of the truth, of your truth, and whatever that means to anyone, is just really important.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think one of the comments I got, and actually it was nice because the group I recorded with the other day, each of their stories always talked about how their whole deconstruction moment started when they went to Bible college. So it was very interesting because the feedback I got, or at least the criticism I got, is, well, should we be sending kids to Christian universities if they're teaching things that's causing them to lose their faith? And my response to them has been, well, if the church is actually teaching what the Bible says, then maybe people wouldn't be losing their faith. Or if the, like we talked about questions, if the church is open for people to ask difficult questions, no matter how ridiculous it may be. The most primary example that I always hear from like kids is, are there dinosaurs in the Bible? Or, stuff like that, where it's like, if there's a difference between having a conversation with a 5-year-old about that and really talking to them and really kind of really doing that, as opposed to saying, well, you shouldn't ask dumb questions like that, or just simply ignore them and go to whatever your lesson plan teaches, and you just completely ignore them in their questions. It's like, well, if that's the culture and the attitude that you are setting, where people aren't allowed to feel like that they can ask questions, or people who may be struggling with something, whether struggling in a marriage or struggling with addiction, and they're a member of your church. And if you create a culture where it's like, well, the only people who can come to church are people who have everything all figured together. And yet, again, going back, I mean, I'm sure the people who came to hear Jesus speak on the Sermon on the Mount were people who had it all together. I think it was people who were looking for something, who felt like they weren't getting anything from the established church or the established temples, because all they were saying is, well, you're not allowed to worship here because you're impure, or you're not good. So then Jesus is speaking on the mountains and the roads and in villages, and people are drawing. And then, of course, the Pharisees are getting mad because, and I may get some blowback for this, but because, well, you're not coming to temple and you're not putting your tithe into our temple pot. And it's like, yeah, but they're hearing the truth, and they don't feel like that. And they actually treat it like a person who really needs help, or people who want to be transformed by the teachings of Jesus Christ and the healing of Jesus Christ, and not felt like, well, the only contribution that I make to the church is me coming on a Sunday morning and dropping some coins in the pot. And that's it, because that's how I'm treated in this environment. So my final question is, where do you see yourselves out? Well, Lindsay, did you have something? I saw that finger go up.
I was going to just jump back to
Go ahead, jump.
the statement that you're talking about, this a childlike heart and a childlike questioning of things. And I think this because in some of my workshops that I've been doing, I invite people to think about their childhood and what was the most exciting experience, and questions that you had as a kid that you kind of are quieted now as an adult, like, oh, it's silly to pick up a hula hoop and spin around, or why would you whatever, play with Play-Doh as an adult, or something like that. So it's just like inviting that in and asking questions and dreaming and thinking is something that I think people lose touch with, because, oh, society tells me that I'm not supposed to do this, or and so it's just like, oh, if we can go back to that childhood thinking, or find our inner child a little bit and be okay with that, and really applaud those questions, I think that we could have a little bit more grace and a little bit more acceptance and understanding, really, because I think that when we're vulnerable, then we can, somebody else is giving that opportunity to share their story too, and you could relate to somebody that you didn't know that you could relate to if you're not talking.
Yeah, that's a valid point, Lindsay. Thank you for sharing that. So to kind of wrap up, my final question is, where are you at now with your spiritual journey? Do you feel like you have landed somewhere? You feel like you have a firm foundation somewhere, wherever that may be? Or do you feel like you're still kind of shedding the skin, or shedding off some of the weight that you have, or maybe you're just like, I'm not sure where to land. I feel like I'm kind of being drawn over here or drawn over here, and I'm still kind of feel like I'm in this state of unknowing. I'm just floating. So John-Mark, I'll go ahead and start with you on this one.
Yeah, I've landed in a pretty firm spot, in a close relationship with Jesus, and I'm really secure in him and in the scriptures, and I would be totally lost, without the Bible. But it's been so long that I've been in it, and I feel pretty secure at this point. And it's good to have my family right there with me to come along, because I've been kicked out of church, and I've been treated really badly, by the religion itself, but to be really secure in my relationship with him and in the Word it's really everything to me. So, but it's been a process that's been going on for a long, long time.
Yeah. All right, Lindsay, what about you?
Trying to unmute my phone.
That's okay.
I do have a relationship with God, but and again, it's so personal, right? So I enjoy praying, when I want to pray, and I think my meditation is journaling and energy. And, I say being out in nature is my meditation, because I do think that, that's Mother Nature. Mother Nature is very spirit to me. So that's a big part of my world, a huge part of my world. And being there and being present. Just this past weekend, I went on this hike and I sat down on this bench and I was journaling, and there's this light shining. And I always say that my grandparents are with me when I'm hiking, but I took this picture and it's me and my journal, and this light is just on this bench right next to me. And I was like, Grandpa's sitting there writing with me. And it was just so amazing. And I'm like walking away all just energized, like my grandparents are hanging out. It's a great Sunday. It's just beautiful, right? And so that to me is God, right? God showing me that it's okay, that life is good, and that you can find beauty in these small things, that are all around if you just look. And so that's where I'm at with my spiritual path.
Okay. All right. And Mandi.
I feel like Lindsay and I would get along so well. Everything she's saying is like, yes, yes, yes.
Well, just fly out to Arizona, Mandi.
Come on over.
You already moved to Tennessee. Wait, you already moved to Tennessee, right? So now just move farther west.
I'm halfway
Michael
there.
W. Smith, go west, young man.
Yeah, I think that where I was when we last spoke is pretty much where I still am, and that's just kind of like being comfortable in the unknown. I don't ever feel like I want to definitively say like yes or no to anything. And I find a lot of freedom in that. I know that may be like anxiety inducing for some people, and I totally get that. But for me personally, I found so much freedom in just saying like, I really don't know, and being open to conversations of with all kinds of people, and just hearing what they have to say and living my life as I experience it. Like, I'd like to say that I believe that there's a higher power, like there's somebody who's like maybe looking out for us. Maybe it's God. Maybe it's like a mixture of what I thought God was mixed with like Mother Nature, the universe, like some great, big, beautiful higher power. I don't know. And I don't know if anybody knows for certain. And I'm just really okay with not knowing. I've leaned a lot into my own intuition and into my own morals and my own beliefs, and things that, like I said last time, I've believed for my whole life, and I've just grown more comfortable in those. So yeah, I'm just very comfortable sitting in the unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and and I think again, when we think about our journeys in life, I think so much of our journeys are shaped by the cultures we're in, and I think about my own personal journey. Now I'm still trying to find my next assignment or my next church that God would call me to minister, but at the same time I'm okay with this new position I'm at, or I'm okay making bread and cookies at a bakery, and I'm okay with on a Sunday morning going to church and doing a consultation or doing an assessment, or helping other people, other churches or organizations try to change their culture, because sometimes there's some churches that they're like, well, we don't know why aren't we growing? Why aren't we doing this? And when I come in and I'm able to say, and I'm able to witness what a Sunday morning feels like, or if they are like, oh, we are having difficulty trying to hire a associate, and it's like, okay, well, let's look at everything and let me see what questions you're asking. And I can even easily pinpoint and go, yeah, this is where you're losing your top candidates, because of some of these questions you're asking. Some of these are very like not biblical or not scriptural questions. Some of them are very personal, and I understand within church within church, you have a pastor or staff person or a leader that comes in and you want them to come into this position and you want to have a relationship with them. But at the same time, you're kind of presenting it in a way where you're already judging them on not on their work or their ministry or their skills or their techniques, but you're basically judging them on, oh, well, if this person, we have a lot of fishers who like to go fishing, but yet you like to play basketball. Well, we don't know if this would be a good, like weird stuff like that. Like, I mean, I could talk on all the weird things I've found in the last year at places I've been consulting, but it's stuff like that where it's like, it goes back to, what do you believe? And even if you don't really know what you believe and you're still kind of in this state of unknowing, that's okay too, because if you're continuing to seek something, if you're continuing to seek God with all your heart, and eventually you're going to get to a place where you feel like, okay, I now know what I believe. I now know where my identity is rooted in. And here it is. And this is where I find my security is in this. And I think that's kind of important and I think that's important in not only just with our faith, but even within our lives. Like Lindsay, you went from a corporate job to doing that. I'm sure your identity was rooted in the corporate world. Now your identity is rooted in being kind of a free spirit entrepreneur and not having the security of, but at the same time, you also have the freedom. You don't have to worry about driving into an office 9 to 5 or have to wear a power suit. You can wear whatever you want and do your work, and that's fine. John-Mark, I mean, you have your own painting business, so you can make your own hours. And even if you're just like, oh, hey, Scott, come over on Wednesday for Bible study. I'm going to put off my work so we can have Bible study and coffee together. Okay, cool. Yeah. It's stuff like that where it's like, you have some of that freedom. And I think sometimes having that freedom, or especially like what I would like to call kind of eliminating the noise in our life and basically having that time of rest, having that time where you can sit on a bench and journal, or have that time where you can dive into word, or even just have that time where you can just sit in your car and just have music blasting and just kind of get lost in that. Like, that's a way of rejuvenating and rest and really trying to get back into a certain rhythm where you could go, okay, what is it in my spiritual journey that I truly believe? And what are some new elements that I'm kind of shedding? And what are some new growth that's kind of coming in my life? And where's that going to take me? And where's the stuff that I'm going to let go? How far am I going to soar? Using like a hot air balloon motif there just now. But yeah, so those are just kind of my final thoughts. Yes, Lindsay.
I was just going to say on the energy thing and then finding an identity again, leaving the corporate career, because I traveled all the time. I was male dominated or, industry, and this constant, I had to set boundaries and, answering a phone or responding to an email. And I still feel that pull of just like constant, like, oh, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to, turn in this quote, or I have to get this thing done. And now I'm just like, oh, wow, I can just sit here and breathe for a minute, but then a part of me is like, oh, well, now I have to go find my new business. And so, I still got to get out there. But there is it's a different type of energy though. And so right now I'm networking with all these people that have different, similar interests to me. And the energy is so different and so positive compared to where it was in my old world, that I didn't have any idea what I was missing. I really just had no clue that I could, I say take off those corporate handcuffs, but I was like, well, how am I going to survive with all these corporate handcuffs on, and then, and I take this step away and I say, God will provide, and you have to believe that abundance is there, and if you want to call it God, call it universe, call it spirit, will provide whatever that means to you. I just have to, I say, trust that whisper, trust whatever that is, because stepping out on that was just, it has been, like I said, the farmers market opened up, and, this option for, talking to HR companies is opening up, with writing as a wellness opportunity is just so special. And I didn't even think about that before. And so I do say, you know, once you're willing to step into that and just trust, things will happen for you and open up, and you'll meet new people that have similar interests and opportunities. And I just think that that is incredible. And that is all.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, guys, again, thank you so much for being back on the show. Thank you for kind of sharing kind of where you're at in your journeys now. I greatly appreciate it. And, you know, and I definitely look forward to at least some point down this year or maybe next year, just not necessarily checking in on this, but even just talking about other stuff on my show. So guys, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Scott.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
And again, to my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate you listening and enjoying the content that I'm putting out. If you would like to support the Scott Stedman podcast, you can at ko-fi.com/Scott Stedman podcast. There's different incentives and stuff that just basically helps grow the podcast and hopefully be able to get more interviews and be able to pay for great stuff like this of having more than just me and a co-host or another guest talking. We can have multiple people talking and have great conversations. So guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll be back on with the next episode. Take care.